In August, Mazda will introduce a new flagship of its local range, and it's called the CX-90, and that is one. But this is Australia, and it's not August 2023. That's because Mazda has flown out a very special example all the way from the US to give us an early indication of what we can expect later in the year. Speaking of the US, to my eye at least, this car looks like it was designed for the American market. Now I should point out that this is a pre-production version and there will be a few little differences, but it is fairly representative of a version we will get in Australia. 3 grades will be on offer, including this, which is representative of the highest Azami grade. And as it's the top spec version, it gets 21-inch wheels. Others will get smaller, down to 19-inch hoops. This badge on the side, it says inline 6, and that's something I want to talk a lot about later. But everything in this car is big in proportions. It's tall, it's long, huge doors, and at the back, there's a big boot. Have a look inside the power-operated tailgate boot, and you'll find no full-size spare, and there's not one underneath either. I've had a look. And because this is a pre-production version, there's no can of goo and an inflator kit either, so I'm not quite sure what this car will get. You'll probably be interested in that if you plan to take it off-road. It is an all-wheel drive, you might actually consider doing that. While we're back here, let's have a look at some of the other features. I've got 12-volt power socket here for charging a fridge or whatever at the back, but I've also got a 120-volt power outlet so you can plug in household items. Lots of storage. It might not look very big, but let me tell you, this is 606 litres. Now I know what you're thinking, that's not a lot for a huge SUV, but what if I told you that this car had 3 rows of seating? Suddenly that makes this boot one of the biggest in its class. If you want extra boot space, you can open up the entire rear space to more than 2,000 litres of volume, which is huge. And speaking of huge, you get a sense of space everywhere in the CX-90's cabin. Up front here, honestly, there's almost too much to take in. Now, back with the current generation Mazda 3, Mazda decided to go in a more premium direction, and that whole strategy culminates with this car. The quality and the feel of materials is absolutely extraordinary. This amazing suede material on the dash that extends to the doors. I've got these lovely quality, soft touch plastics everywhere. An almost Bentley-esque steering wheel. This 2-tone leather upholstery is part of the SP package you get add on top of the Azami grade, and it brings so much quality and feel. Technology rates pretty well as well. For example, this is the top spec version, as I say, so you get a 12.3-inch screen in the center and another one for the driver's instrument cluster. Opt for one of the lower grades and that shrinks to 10.3 and 7-inch, but still digital all round, which is pretty good. There's also wireless device charging, and you can pair your smartphone cordlessly, whether it's Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. Now up front there is loads of space and comfort for front passengers, but at the back there's lots more to talk about. Now, as this is the SP grade, instead of 3 seats in the middle row, you get 2 seats, or captain's chairs as they're called by Mazda. And what that means is you can get a similar level of comfort in the second row as you would up front. I can spend all day in those seats, they're very comfortable. What I really want to show you is the third row, because this car is a 6-seater. It would be a 7-seater if we had the standard second row, which means I get 2 extra back seats back here. I'm particularly interested to spend some time back here because normally 7-seaters or 6-seaters for someone like me is an absolute nightmare. But as you can see, I've got tons of room in front of my knees. I've got plenty of headroom thanks to that curious profile on the outside, which frees up loads of space inside for people and things. Perhaps the only thing is classic 7-seater, very high knee position, which might feel a little bit strange on longer trips. But comfort levels are generally very good, thanks in part to USB-C charging. I've got 2 cup holders, and I've even got my own little individual air vent, and it's the same on that side too. So this car, you can see, is very well spec'd. But back to that badge on the outside, an inline 6, that is what we need to talk more about. I've always loved inline 6-cylinder engines, and with this new 3.3, Mazda is making inline 6s both exciting and relevant. While many manufacturers are downsizing engines and reducing the number of cylinders in the name of efficiency and economy, Mazda has done something that bucks the trend a little bit. Under the bonnet of this car is a 3.3 litre straight 6 engine, and that excites me greatly because I've always loved inline 6s. They're smooth, they sound fantastic, they have incredibly good vibration dampening, and they can, under certain circumstances, be very efficient as well. Mazda has bolted onto this one a 48-volt hybrid, very mild hybrid subsystem, which makes this car a little bit more efficient. Now, we haven't got exact fuel economy figures just yet, so you'll have to wait. But when it comes to performance, that's where this car really makes sense. Big 3-row SUVs normally rely on 4-cylinder diesel engines to do the legwork, but this has got a far more refined and sophisticated straight six engine, and it sounds glorious. It is super smooth, and it produces 254 kilowatts of power and 500 newton meters of torque, which is ample to hustle a big SUV like this along. But if you're craving diesel power, then you can have one of those as well. Mazda, in unison with this engine, has developed a 3.3 litre straight six turbo diesel engine as well, and that produces 550 newton meters. So the engine gets a big tick from me, but there's other stuff to like as well. It's on the company's new rear drive biased large product platform, or architecture as Mazda calls it, and that has changed everything over the CX-9, including the handling and body control. Now, I'm pushing it through some of these ride and handling tests and challenges at a closed proving ground, which means I can really stretch its legs and find out exactly what it can do. And already, after not spending that much time in it, I'm realizing that there is a beautiful balance of body control, ride comfort, and noise and vibration. We can find out going over those vibration strips, combined with a really good dynamic character as well. There's only 3 driving modes to the CX-90. The one I'm switching out of is normal, and I'm going into sport mode. There's an off-road mode, which unfortunately I won't get a chance to test today. But put it into its more sporty, naughty nature, and there's actually quite a remarkable difference. The steering, which previously was already very sweet, and certainly not something I would expect from a car of this size, becomes even sharper, even more communicative. It's amazing how precisely you can position the CX-90 on the road, but it's really surprising me already. I've also got some wet and dry patches of the road. This particular road is very representative of something you may find in Australia, with changing surfaces, some pretty horrible patches, and I've even got some tram lines here. Lovely. But no matter what you throw at this car's chassis, it seems to just respond with a really likeable nature, but not one that's soporific. I'm always entertained at the wheel of this thing, whether it's cruising around and enjoying this amazing interior or having a bit of fun. Wasn't expecting that today. And that brings me down to the price. This car, when it arrives in August this year, will start at around $74,000 or just over. Now, for a large SUV from a Japanese manufacturer, you could argue the entry point is a little bit expensive, but if you get stuck in to the options and you go for the top spec version and add on one of the optional packs, it tops out at over $100,000. Yes, that might make you wince slightly, but when you look at what you're getting, a straight 6-cylinder engine, 6 or 7 seats, a level of luxury and specification Mazda is striving to do better in and succeeding extraordinarily. And particularly when you look at something like a Pathfinder, if you load that up with its top spec version, chuck a few options at it, you're not far off that price anyway. So to my mind, this first little taste of the CX-90 has revealed a car that I thought I was going to come away thinking was very expensive, but actually it seems pretty good value. And if that's not enough to convince you, then think of it like this. With a lovely straight 6 engine under the bonnet and 254 kilowatts, this, believe it or not, is the most powerful Mazda ever made. I really only have one criticism of this car, and it comes down to that 12.3-inch screen as a central display. The resolution is quite good, but what it appears Mazda has done is just expanded the standard infotainment system to fill a much larger screen, and so the font and everything is looking a little bit sort of low res and a little bit too expanded for my liking. Really a fairly small black mark on an otherwise unspotted blotting paper.